everybody went to town on Saturday night. The farmers all came in and picked up their groceries, and in fact, some of them would even get their cars and put them on Main Street so they could sit and watch the people go by and visit with everybody, because that was a big social time to everybody come and visit with each other. And my brother and I, we used to go to the show, and we earned money to spend for Saturday night, and the way we did that, we hoed 3 rows in the garden every day for a penny a row, and then we practiced our piano lessons and got 2 cents for that. So we got 5 cents a day. So we earned 25 cents during the week, and that would for 10 cents for the show and 5 cents for popcorn, why we had money left over.
All right.
What were some of the movies that you liked to see?
George Raft. He was Thelma Jones, and I never missed a George Raft movie.
What are the earliest films that you remember going to see?
Charlie Chaplin type of film. Mary Pickford.
Captain's Courageous and Spencer Tracy.
The first movie I ever seen in the theater was Ma and Pa Kettle.
It was Pa and Ma Kettle.
It was Old Yeller.
Probably have to say it was Old Yeller.
Like Bambi.
Saturday Night Fever with John Travolta.
The Al Jolson story.
I want to say it was James Bond, Thunderball.
My mom took me to Superman. I don't even think I can remember to tell you what the first movie was that I went to there. Yeah. I remember going to Good Morning Vietnam with my grandma and grandpa Bisker and thinking, oh my goodness, as I'm sitting there with them, you know.
I remember going to the movie here on a Sunday afternoon, a hot summer day. I was about 7 or 8, went to Gone with the Wind.
First one I remember, Bryce, is the boy with the green hair.
Yeah, that was...
It was a black and white film, but his hair was green.
I remember all the cowboys, the main cowboys that was in them, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers.
I loved the weekend double features because there was almost always a Randolph Scott Western, and then the other feature would be a B horror picture.
I always liked Abbott and Costello was my favorite movies, and Lone Ranger.
Lone Ranger and some of them. I used to get 50 cents a week and we'd go to the movie every Saturday.
It was a 14-cent movie that I went to see.
Oh, quarter.
You know, the folks used to give me a quarter to go to the Sunday matinee, and I'd get popcorn in the movie out of it.
And you could go for a dime and stay all day long.
I can remember going there for 9 cents. And then nobody wanted that penny, so we threw it on the floor wherever we were sitting.
I was told if they charged a dime, they had to add a penny tax. And now it would be 11 cents, and they'd have to deal in all those pennies.
But I remember it was really hard to come by 10 cents, too, at that time.
We're doing chores all week. It held it together.
I collected pop bottles because you got 2 cents a bottle. And really, it'd only take 5 bottles, and you had a movie ticket.
And then if you got out of the movie and went down to Abbott's Variety, you'd get a Nesbitt bottle of orange for a nickel.
That was the days when we enjoyed life.
Don't enjoy it now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Part of the philosophy that we use in operating theaters in South Dakota is that we may be in a small town in South Dakota in the middle of the country and far removed from the major metropolitan areas. And perhaps because we live here, because it's a matter of personal pride, but we're going to give you as good an experience here as you can get in Minneapolis, Chicago, New York, LA. We've got the small town friendliness with the big town professionalism and big town amenities that when they come to our theaters, they're getting just what they would in a city.
Wasn't Saturday night kind of the big night?
It was a big night. This town was lively until 1 o'clock in the morning. The men went to the bars, and the ladies went to the grocery store, bought their groceries, and then sat in the front of the grocery store and waited for their husbands until the bar closed.
We could go to a movie
every night of the week, and there was always a second show too, that you could go at 7:30 or you could go at 9, and we had good houses both times.
On Sunday evening in particular, they had 2 shows on Sunday, and plus a matinee in the afternoon.
That's where we grew up. That's where we did our courting.
The guys would take their girlfriends out to the second movie. That was very, very mysterious to do that. And the younger, like me, come out of the theater from the first evening performance, and there would be just good-sized crowds out on the main street waiting to go in after we got out. So the community really wanted the place.
Talk to me about the Strand and the balcony.
That's where all the kids went, the younger kids. And then the others would be sitting down there in couples, and then you'd have to watch your head because those kids were kind of mean with their throwing spit wads and whatnot.
I know, I used to go up there to watch them make out.
That's what I was going to ask. What were the couples doing?
Well, they were very annoyed with those little guys.
But we'd go out in the balcony.
Did you do stars?
I haven't played yet.
I played.
But that was the only entertainment, actually, we had. That was a big deal. And then when I got in high school, it was a big deal to get a date and a girl. And
Yeah, just go here.
Yeah.
Take your date over here and go watch a movie.
Yeah. And how did that work out for you?
Must have worked pretty good because I married her.
All right.
Been married for 55 years.
One time, Mark and I were sitting there holding hands, and Elizabeth came up the aisle, and her friend said to her, "They're sitting there holding hands." Well, that was part of the, courting and growing up and going to the movies.
What do you like about South Dakota?
everything, especially the women.
Really?
Yeah. Hey, I've been all over.
Okay.
I've been to Europe, I've been to Hawaii, and South Dakota women are just as good.
Before the main movie started.
A little continuing episode or a cartoon, and that would start.
I'll have a generous portion, for which I will gladly pay you Tuesday.
Olive oil and Popeye. Popeye was popular.
And it used to have a big curtain that would open.
The thing that I really remember about those years is that they had newsreels of World War II.
Mr. Churchill evinces keen interest in the paratroopers and their equipment. These are men trained to fight a modern war. Listening in by two-way portable radio.
And a lot of people would go to movies just to pick those up because it was like 3-day-old television or something, you know. It was a way of informing the public of the progress in the war. It was very informative.
Then there would be, of course, previews of what's coming, and then, of course, the Western.
You'd had your supper in jail if I hadn't been there to get you out of that scrape.
That was the main attraction.
The Westerns were, if you saw one, you saw them all, of course. They cut them off at the pass.
Oh, Hopalong Cassidy was a big one.
Tim Holt, Gene Autry, Roy Rogers, and the shows that always had a happy ending.
Yeah.
And Total Lesson.
Yeah.
That was great. That was the only thing we had.
But I used to go visit relatives in North Dakota out on the farm. And you kind of, you stayed out on the farm all week long, but then on Saturday night, man, you got cleaned up and you went to town. And everybody was there. So, and when we moved to Armour, I kind of half expected that to go on, and it didn't really.
Where Britain is situated, we're 60 miles from Aberdeen.
We're 40 miles from Webster, 40 miles from Sisseton, 40 miles from Oaks, North Dakota. All communities similar in size to us with the exception of Aberdeen. And all these communities had theaters at one time and they closed. This was all during the late 70s, early 80s.
Lots of towns still have their movie theater on Main Street, but it's been converted to a TV shop or whatever.
The theater near my hometown in Tracy closed when I was in college and became a racquetball court.
This has been a barber shop for 100 years, but the theater has always been next door. It was next door for a long time, yeah. Then they changed it into a bowling alley after that.
Yeah, they turned it into a bowling alley.
As everyone in the Midwest knows, the 1980s were not kind to rural America. And a lot of businesses have closed their doors. That was the fate of this building. It would have probably turned into a parking lot.
The old one-time theater that Platt had when we were younger kids, movies stopped showing about 1975. It was falling down, the windows were falling out, and the doors were plywood, it shut.
You know, that's been closed since the early 70s.
The last time they had movies, I don't really know.
In the late 70s, I'd say, mid-70s was the last time.
And E.T. was the last movie shown here. We do know that in the early 80s.
The last movie before it closed was Jaws. I do remember that.
There is a creature alive today who has survived millions of years of evolution. Without change, it lives to kill.
I left here in the 60s, and I felt like I grew up in the heydays of the small town. It was absolutely a busy, bustling place. There was a farm on every mile.
I believe December of '85 was the last movie they showed.
So you guys remember when it closed down?
It was a drag because our next closest theater was Aberdeen, which is 60 miles away.
The closest theater was 45 minutes away in Mitchell.
They would go to Watertown or Brookings.
Or Sioux Falls.
Because there wasn't any theaters even in any of the small towns.
Winter has a theater which is 30 miles, but otherwise you would have to travel to Wagner or possibly Platt, I believe.
So if they wanted to take in a movie, they had to go all the way to Mitchell. You know, that's 70 some miles away. It was big. You know, you basically had to spend a lot more money. I know when I was growing up, either drove Maine all night, or you had to go out 100 miles plus.
So did you guys go to Aberdeen quite a bit? Go to movies?
I did, all the time.
A lot of driving around.
A small town theater is very similar to a small town school. Once that school is consolidated and moves out of the community suffers. And I think it's the same with the theater.
We need that, and we need our own people to support our own local theaters.
At one time, you know, your other theater that was maybe 30 miles away or 40 miles away, you know, they were your stiff competition, and boy, they were the enemy. You didn't help them out, and they didn't help you out. If you tore gear out of a projector, they might have 3 of them that would work, but they wouldn't loan one to you, you know, because, geez, you were the enemy. Let you sit dark, and that was the way it happened.
In preparation for the night's movie, you'd have to splice the previews together and check the cue points and so on, and there's usually anywhere 4, 5, 6 reels for the movie. They were Simplex, was the brand name on them, and it had big, huge, almost like a barrel, carbon arc lamps that we used to produce enough light to get on here to the screen. And it was the same film we use now, I imagine, the 35 millimeter film. But now they're all spliced together in one big long reel. But we'd change about every 18, 19 minutes, we'd be changing from one reel to another.
The thing about running those is it's much more involved for the projectionist because they're up here constantly threading a machine and doing things.
Around here, one night I got the wrong reel back in a Western and brought some guy back to life that had been shot 20 minutes earlier.
It was skill and art.
You can still see the cue points, the cue marks on the screen nowadays.
You're looking at 20 or 21 minutes, and this reel is done. You've got to make a changeover to the other projector, to the next reel of the movie. If somebody isn't up here and that reel comes to an end, you're in trouble. In the latter part of the 60s, a lot of the indoor theaters, just especially the smaller ones, just disappeared.
The same family that ran it for so many years aged, and they just couldn't handle it anymore, so they tried to sell it.
The ones that were left were theaters that, had somebody to pass them down to.
We owned and operated the theater there from 1949 until 1953.
Did you ever make money?
No, I think the year we sold, we had a fire and had to replace the screen and a few other things and do the cleaning. And we lost $181 that year, so we thought, oh no, this is enough of this.
So because it was a smaller town, they really couldn't afford remodelings over the years.
They didn't accommodate people in our communities the way they used to, because the multiplexes came about in Aberdeen and other communities, and you had your choice of movies. Instead of one every night, you could go see 3, in a day if you wanted to.
In the 60s and 70s, a lot of theaters that survived got a modernization treatment, a cheap modernization of red indoor-outdoor carpet, paneling on the walls in the lobby, and draped the auditorium. And they totally ruined them.
It's a large building, and it cost a lot to heat it, quite a bit to cool it.
These buildings were built back when building costs were cheap, fuel costs were cheap, and they weren't built energy efficiently.
I can tell you one memory. I remember one time I was there. There wasn't many people in the theater, and there was popcorn on the floor, and the rats were picking it up.
As they were getting to be so hard to maintain.
And movies were just kind of down at that time.
Print availability. There's a couple of years where they're just, the supply of movies was pretty small.
Just film companies made it less profitable for small towns.
They wanted a percentage on the better movies, and he really couldn't afford the percentages, and by the time he could get them here, people had been to Aberdeen, maybe Fargo, someplace else.
It became not unusual to go to Mitchell. You did shopping out of town, and there was less shopping to be done in town, and I think society just changed somewhat.
It didn't bother them to drive to Mitchell or someplace else, and they weren't staying in their hometowns.
There were just a lot of opportunities for different entertainment around.
And it closed just lack of attendance.
Television. Everybody by that time had television.
Television mostly.
Television.
Television.
Well, TV.
I think that's what ruined it, is the television. The television came and then came in and they stayed home and watched TV.
And renting movies shut it down.
Do you know how long it was shut down for?
Boy, I'll bet it's 20 years. I don't know for sure, but it's a long time. 15 years at least.
Ever since we opened, I could be walking down the street and somebody would stop and greet me and say, "Oh, we're so thankful that you opened the theater. We just, it has made a big difference in our community, and keep it open. We want this." And it never ends, even now after 14 years.
And it's a social gathering spot, and there's people here in town that go to every doggone movie no matter what it is, just so they can get out and socialize with other people. A place where everybody enjoys going to now.
And it's about the only entertainment in Webster.
There's nothing to do in Webster. Usually we drive around and meet up with friends. We go down to Mike's Jack and Jill and sit in the parking lot and talk all night. It's very boring here.
There's really nothing new to do. It's just like the same old same. Nothing really changes about anything.
Go to the lakes.
Driving around, taking Mainers, driving up and down Main Street and stuff.
Hang out with friends.
Going over to somebody's house, having some fun, whatever.
You go to the movies at the Webster Theater?
Not really.
Not really?
Maybe like once every 2 months.
I probably go about twice a month.
The movies here are like a month older than the ones in Aberdeen and Watertown. They show more kid movies and not more fun ones. And a lot of kids these days, like my age, like scary rated R movies.
What kind of movies do you like?
Scary movies.
I'm Vincent Price. You're invited to my party in the house on Haunted Hill.
where so far the ghosts have murdered only 7 people. So won't you come and make it 8?
And not a lot of those come to Webster. It's more like PG-13 or like the little kids movies.
I prefer the family type movies, and those are the ones that I get the best attendance to.
There's so many movies that come out and only a few of them get to Webster.
I don't know, as far as I know, we get them all. I mean, if there's any we don't get, usually it's because I don't hear about them anyway.
So we all drive to Aberdeen and watch the movies. Get out of Webster.
You got a car?
Mm-hmm.
Who pays for gas?
Me.
Oh, it's big time for a small town. Gosh, I remember back when I was a kid, you'd drive around or go on a family trip and you'd go through other towns and you'd always look to see if they had a theater. And of course, back then, most of them did. I think, like any business that shuts down in a small town, you think, oh gosh, here goes another one or something like that. But in a theater, I think it has a little bit more relevance. And, again, because people, that's part of the town, it's their town or their theater. And it again, distinguishes small towns.
I was looking for something. I wanted to do something. I was on the farm and my kids were growing, and so I wanted something else. It was for sale for 7-8 years. It had been closed, and it kind of interested me, and so I inquired about it and talked to my husband, Dennis, about it, and he didn't want nothing to do with it, so I went ahead and I put in a bid unbeknown to him. He didn't know what I was doing. Then I did go to him and said, I want to buy this. We spent a lot of hours here working. Oh, it was in bad shape, yeah. Needed a lot of work. The heating system was totally gone from here. They say the last few years that they did have the movie, people would come in their snowmobile suits and parkas and sit in here and watch the movie. It was so cold. Basically, the lobby is what it was. We put new ceiling in the auditorium, and we covered the walls with cloth. We used the old seats for quite a while. We left those in. The theater held over 600 people, and we cut down. Right now we have 163 seats. Oh, we had lots of volunteer help. That's the only way we'd have gotten it done. We couldn't hire it all done, so we had the doors open, and people would come in, and they'd pick up a hammer and say, what can I do? We would be working here sometimes 1 o'clock, and still people would come in and offer to help. And I think they got excited about it too, and they knew we needed the help. We couldn't have done it without the community.
And what would happen if it suddenly shut down?
Oh, I don't know. Everybody would probably be mad at me.
Born and raised in the Platte area, and went to school here and graduated from high school in '61. Started in the grocery business at that time.
When I came to town, he was a carryout boy. Later, he built a grocery store here.
Currently the chairman of the board of Affiliated Foods, has about 1,000 stores in the 12-state area. All independent grocers, and so they can compete and keep these smaller towns alive.
He's meant a lot to the community.
We thought we'd like to give something back, so we looked across the street at the old one-time theater that Platte had when we were younger kids and went to movies. And it had been a museum for a few years. Movies stopped showing about 1975. A little history on the building. It's built in 1900 when Platte was started, and then it was used as a school. Well, the school burnt down in 1912, and so they had the high school graduate here, and they held classes. And then in 1915, this building burned down. And Cools, who'd done a lot of stuff in Platte, had a furniture store in it and a mortuary in the back, and then they had an opera house on top. And then when that burned down, they moved the furniture across the street to another building.
In fact, at one time in this Lyric Theater, there was a flat floor and it was a dance hall. And
so they had live bands, and when movies came in and they cut the sides and dropped the floor down to make for a movie house.
There wasn't any sound back then. There was a lady who would be playing the piano all during the movie, and words would be printed on the screen. You just read along and cheered and booed, and then invariably, at least 2 or 3 times, the film would break and the lights would come on, and then they'd get it patched up and get back to the movies. And
You worked for a little bit for the Lyric Theater?
well, mostly delivering handbills. Back in those days, that was their way of advertising. So during the week and on Saturday night, they'd hire us for 10 cents and a free movie to go around with these handbills showing what movies were going to play, and we'd put them under the windshield wipers and put them in the screen doors. And then if we get tired of delivering, we might take them all and stick them in a culvert, and hopefully that it'll rain and wash them away.
Did you ever get caught?
Yeah, I finally got caught, and had to work for nothing.
You were a troublemaker, weren't you?
Yeah, well, yeah, kinda. I was kind of a hooligan.
Mark King took it upon himself to reopen the theater, put a lot of money into it.
We got the museum people to sell us the building for a little money, and then moved the museum out of here. This building took a lot of work, which not only I did, but a lot of volunteers from the Platte community did. We had a lot of people that would ask us what we needed. Some gave money, some wanted to buy these seats. You know, we had retired carpenters, we had postal delivery guys working here, and put a lot of hours in, and we had to start from the top to the bottom, from the windows to the roof. And we didn't have no real plan when we put it together. It just kind of fell together as we all worked on it. And once we got it fixed up, we turned it over to the Platte Development Corporation, which is a nonprofit.
Which is the city, which is all of us, you know.
They own it, we maintain it for them. It is quite interesting to see how bad it was and how it did turn out. You know, it hasn't lost or grown a whole lot.
Well, we're blessed by a great location. The river has developed into a great destination for fishermen and water sports.
It's kind of a vibrant little town. A lot of Dutch heritage. I don't know if that has anything to do with it or not, but
a lot of old families in town that tend to come back. You know, generally the kids will leave town, but you see a lot of younger kids coming back to this town because it is so strong.
We've got a pretty vibrant Main Street. There is no really empty buildings in Platte.
This year we're going to have a terrific winter wheat crop. We're 60, 70 miles from Mitchell and Yankton and 120 from Sioux Falls, so there needs to be a Platte.
Happy day, oh happy day, oh happy day, oh happy day, when Jesus was,
We thought we had to have more than movies on weekends to make this thing survive, so we wanted to have live entertainment also.
There's a dinner theater on Saturday night, and my wife tells me that we're going to it.
It has a back room on it that we wanted to have to serve 120 to 30 meals. We do get entertainers as far as away from Minneapolis, Michigan, and Omaha.
Whether it be comedians, you know, hypnotists, you name it, you know, they got them coming in and groups, singing groups.
It's amazing how the word of mouth travels.
The entertainment is unbelievable for a small town.
Brings a lot of business to town.
Along with any success, there's got to be some luck. It's kind of sad to see the little towns go under. Platte's hanging on. It's not going to be easy, but
This town's got a future, and maybe not all South Dakota towns do have.
I'd never worked in a movie theater or had any idea anything about it.
We were going into the theater business completely blind. And
When we remodeled and moved the screen up as far as we did, it was awful dirty, so we decided we were going to wash it one day. So we took Dawn soap and water, and we got up there and we washed it like this.
There was an old screen hanging on the back wall. We decided we were going to use it, so the first thing we did is we folded it up.
Got hauled outside, and
brought the fire truck from the fire hall, and it got hosed down, and not knowing that there's a silver metallic part to the screen that shouldn't get wet.
But we probably used it for a year.
We did.
And they said, "You did what with that screen?" I said, "We washed it with Dawn soap."
And people accepted the fact that it had creases in it. You know?
It was just amazing that it hadn't turned up all streaked. That's our original silver screen that was in the theater when we bought it, and I'm thinking that was the original screen too. The only silver screen, they tell me, in the States. So
when we first started looking at reopening the Lorraine in '99, we got connected with Jeff Logan up in Mitchell.
Jeff Logan in Mitchell is been an ongoing source of help with advice.
You know, one of the first thoughts that we had is we weren't going to rip tickets. We were just going to let people come in, charge them, and send them into the movie, and we weren't going to do that ticket thing because we didn't want to. And
he was telling us what we shouldn't do and what we should do, and
he informed us that we had to rip tickets, you know, that this was an obligation of having movie companies send their movies to us. So,
you know, he had nothing to gain from it. He maybe lose customers by us, but he was really helpful.
Probably what prompted most of this was getting these seats. The seats basically were donated. Jeff Logan, the owner of the theater in Mitchell, steered us onto these, and so all we had to do was go and get them.
The first time I remember going to a movie was seeing Walt Disney's The Shaggy Dog. And I went with my parents because they were scouting it out, and I remember them saying, "My goodness, they're getting 55 cents for adults now," and just amazed that you could get that high a ticket price. I started working in the business really from 8, 9 years old, as I could do anything. I started working in the theater, so I was sweeping up, or I was carrying posters around town, and then later taking tickets, and went on through and projecting and all that. And I really took over when I got back from college in 1972. My dad had been a contractor in Los Angeles, and done a little bit of remodeling work for some of the theaters out there. His mother asked him to return to Mitchell because his father developed 6 or 7 of the downtown buildings, and they were all vacant but one, and he was going slowly broke. And so my dad came back to help out. It was really the pit of the Depression, and Mitchell was kind of the middle of the Dust Bowl. In these Depression years, the economy was terrible. But this druggist suggested to my dad, "Why don't you build a theater? Put a theater in that vacant building over there where they used to have the car dealership," because theaters seemed to be doing well. My dad, thinking he knew a little bit about the business, and as he said later, had he known what he really should have known, he never would have done it. But he started to draw up plans, so he hired a local architect, and they designed the theater. So he got a ladder, and he got up on the ladder and started taking the big garage doors off the front of the building. Within a few minutes, a man walked by and said, "Well, do you need any help?" My dad said, "Yes, I do, but I can't pay you in cash. But this theater is a corporation, and for every $1 of wages, I'll pay you $1 in stock, of preferred stock, and you'll be part owner of the company, and you'll get 3% guaranteed every year on the preferred stock, plus the value of it." The man said, "Well, that's fine. There's no other job anyway. I'll work for stock." And so he had a helper. And that scene repeated itself. By the end of the day, he had a full crew working. The foreman comes home and said, Nels, we're about the end of the demolition stage of it, and we're going to have to start buying materials. And no one in town is going to charge to you because the manager of the opposition theaters is spreading rumors that you have no money and they're going to put you out of business in 6 months. But the foreman said, however, Fullerton Lumber Company will charge to me personally. So the foreman went down and didn't say what project he was working on, just charged a few bags of cement and some supplies. And then he'd go back every day and charge a little bit more as he needed it. Well, after about a month, the manager of Fullerton Lumber Company said, when are you going to pay for this bill? It's getting pretty big here. And the foreman said, well, I'm down there building the new theater for Nels Logan, and I don't get paid until it's built, and they have money coming in, so you got to keep charging this stuff to me so I can finish the job and get paid myself, and then I can pay you. The Fullerton manager reluctantly agreed to that. And so they kind of worked that con, but by the end of it, they had a $10,000 bill for materials. Of course, in 1933 dollars, would be well over $100,000 today. As time went along, the workmen would come in and want to redeem the stock. And if they had money, they would pay them the face value plus the 3% interest that had been earned. But if it was a slow week and they couldn't afford to pay them, they'd explain, for every dollar that we owe you, we'll give you dollar ticket books. And they would take them over to Main Street, and like scalping tickets, they'd peddle them on the street and maybe discount them a little bit. So a lot of the theater really got built with passes. After a few months, the Fullerton manager called my dad and said, Nels, you got to pay this bill off. So my dad had seen that a lot of the theaters in the 30s were very successful with a bank night promotion.
What was bank night all about?
Well, bank night was a night that they figured that it was a slow night.
They took the slowest night of the week, and that's the night of the drawing, so Tuesday night.
What night of the week did they do this?
Wednesday.
Thursday night was bank night.
That was on Thursday night, I think.
It was on a Wednesday.
It really drew a crowd. People filled the theater.
Bank night was basically a lottery.
You wrote your name on your ticket and dropped it in, and then they would draw for it.
It cost 25 cents to get into the movie, too.
I don't remember much about that. That preceded me.
We kids were not allowed to play.
It was sometimes $100 to $150. Depends on how many tickets got sold that night.
It started $50, as I recall. $50 was a minimum. And then if someone wasn't there, it'd go up in increments of about $10.
You had to be present to win. If you weren't present, then that $100 would go in the pot the next week. The drawing would be $200.
That was quite a bit of money back then. Right?
That was a whole lot of money, yeah.
In those days, people were working for $50 a month, $45 a month.
What, did you ever win it?
No.
No mother one time won $100.
I never won any money. I know my mother won once, and she wasn't there, and she was heartbroken.
My dad bought my older brother, 6 years older, a new car at the Chevy garage in Clear Lake, and it happened to be bank night. I wanted to go up with him and see this ride back with his new car, and we went up, got the car, drove back, and I was riding with him on Main Street when the theater let out, and the first people out saw me going by, and they hollered, "Hey, where you been? You could have won $500." And I told my brother, "Hey, you owe me that for this ride."
That was a big thing in that Depression period.
Now, the bank night idea was copyrighted. And so my dad didn't want to pay the copyright fee. So he changed it just a little bit, and he renamed his Pirate Night. Pirate theme, to get your treasure and all that kind of thing. So my dad hired only the most beautiful girls in town, and then they made little pirate costumes for the girls. And I've had a lot of older gentlemen tell me that, I remember when your dad ran that pirate night, even if we didn't win the drawing, we got to look at those girls in those pirate costumes. During the week, to buy a ticket, it cost 15 cents. Some people would want to enter 2 or 3 times. And then to be present to win, you had to buy a ticket. Tuesday night, pirate night, the price went up to 35 cents. One week, the price had just gotten to $400. The theater was already full, and this entire street is blocked with a crowd of people who are standing out in front, and they bought a full 35-cent ticket just to be eligible to be in the drawing and listen to the drawing over a loudspeaker that was set up on top of the box office. So the first Wednesday morning, my dad took $1,000 cash and put on the counter at Fullerton Lumberyard, and in 10 weeks, the theater was paid off. The competition with Paramount was real tough. Paramount took all the best pictures, all the MGM musicals, and my dad could only get pictures from smaller studios, RKO, who had broken out of the trust agreement, Republican Monogram, some westerns and foreign films, that was later ruled illegal by the Supreme Court. The studios had to sell off their theater chains. So with all the good pictures going to the other 2 theaters, my dad had to do everything he could to promote and do stunts and wild and crazy things to get people to come to the theater. One of the things he did was to get a live African lion and had it in a room off the lobby. So when you came to the show, you could go in to the room and see the lion, and they later added monkeys. But they had the lion for years, and he also built a cage that he could tow behind a sound truck. The RKO branch manager hired my dad to go on the road. In those days, there was a movie that had been made called Assassin of Youth about the evils of marijuana. Like my dad said, he had never even heard of marijuana up till that time. But they had made this movie on how terrible it was. So the gimmick was that they would pull into the local town and they would paint up a sign for the side of the lion's cage that would say, "The fangs of marijuana are more deadly than Frank Buck's Jungle Lion. See Assassin of Youth tonight at the," whatever the name of the local theater was. And they traveled from Montana to Wisconsin with that picture, doing kind of roadshow engagements on it.
Live from KELOLAND Television.
A historical hangout in Mitchell is rubble tonight. The Roxy Theater entertained Mitchell for 70 years. But this morning, an electrical problem ignited a fire that destroyed the downtown building.
In 2001, in January, the Roxy Theater, the original theater, burned. And unfortunately in that, we lost all our scrapbooks, a lot of memorabilia, the computers, the records.
My whole life we've gone to the Roxy to go to movies, and now it's just kind of like, it kind of hits it. You're like, oh, wow, this is my hometown and this is what happens.
I don't know if it's hit me yet. Despite the building's age, Logan kept the wiring and electrical work up to date to protect against fire.
There's always in the back of your mind, you think, well, if it ever happened, what do you do? And what do you do? And then it happens.
For more than 2 hours, firefighters from 4 departments battled the blaze.
You know, all the way through the fire, I thought that the firemen, the guys would be able to get it out. I thought, well, we'll be closed, you know, week or something while we take care of all the smoke damage and rebuild a couple of walls. And what we didn't realize is that the fire had evidently started in a wall near a stairwell, went up into the attic, and once it got into the attic, it just spread across the entire building, and they weren't able to save the building. So that was, you know, an awful shock to us. but we decided to stay in the building or in the business and reinvest in Mitchell and reinvest in the downtown area. And we still had the surviving 3 new additional auditoriums, although no lobby, no restrooms attached to them. It took us 18 months, but we built the new facility that we're in today and tied it in with the other auditorium. So now we have a 5-plex here in Mitchell.
The whole thing started on an Easter Sunday at my mother-in-law's house, and we were just discussing how there's just not much in town and we're gonna lose another building on Main Street, and just didn't see why couldn't be a way to get the theater going again.
We don't have a teen center or a gathering for the young people in town. A lot of people said if you're gonna start a theater, that's not a reason why, but it was one of ours because we could see the kids hanging around and no place to go.
And it really seemed a shame to have this fantastic of a facility sit here and eventually probably get torn down if somebody didn't do something.
You didn't know what you're getting into, right?
Not a clue.
No. So we checked into the nonprofit.
After that, we'd meet every week or two and try to come up with ideas for fundraisers.
We started out with a survey after we got our little group of 4 people to gather here, and we called everybody in the TRIP phone book.
The survey had whether or not they'd be willing to volunteer.
It didn't sound very promising.
There were plenty who told us that will never work.
Might be a nice idea, and it's really good you're gonna try, but I'm not sure 4 women will make it. You'll probably, hate each other in the end.
There's always plenty that are ready to say that.
It's probably like 4 husbands to start with.
We just kind of disregarded our survey and just went ahead.
Wrote lots of letters to anybody we could think of that might be willing to help us financially.
I think our very first thing that we did was a quilt raffle. Wasn't that? We sold chances on a quilt.
During a reunion.
It was an all-school reunion, right. It was a good opportunity to catch a lot of people
who were sentimental about trying to keep the town going even though they didn't live here.
But then after that, we had this little cookie jar of money. We sunk the whole thing into this show called Always Patsy Cline. We hosted it here in our theater.
It cost us a lot.
Cost us a lot of money to get her.
That we didn't have.
Yeah, I mean, we were sticking our neck out, but it was the best thing that we could have done. It got people in the building, and it was a fabulous show, and we had a great turnout, and we really made a lot of money on it.
I remember getting called from Cindy that we got the grant, and I remember thinking, oh, that's so nice. It just makes it so much easier.
I wrote a small, short, to-the-point letter to our former governor and pleaded our cause, and he was very generous and gave us a grant, and without that, we wouldn't have gotten started. We would still be fundraising, and that really got the ball rolling.
Yeah, that was really what gave us the big boost to get this thing off the ground.
The city rents the theater to the Idle Hour Theater Company. Our residents really take in the movies, as well as out-of-town residents. Since Idle Hour Theater began, the city of Tripp has seen an increase in sales tax revenue. You bring in people to a movie, they do other things. It has benefited Tripp tremendously.
Why Tripp? What's so special about this community?
Well, because it's the best place in the Midwest.
And how
You
so?
can't find a better place to live than here. Everybody's friendly, everybody's nice, you can afford to live here. You don't have to be constantly working to pay for your housing. It's a great place to live. And I think one of the draws is to say we got a good grocery store, we have a theater. Our theater, is real inexpensive, and you have a nice style of life.
And we're a very German community.
Is everybody here German?
I think so.
It means we're kind of stubborn.
Stubborn Germans.
There was another theater now where the beauty shop is. So we had 2 theaters going for a while, but that didn't work out very good.
And I do remember getting in a lot of trouble because we did live right next door to the theater. And one night, I guess there was a good movie going on, and I just chose to go to the theater. and I'm sitting down in the theater, and I guess it wasn't a real good movie. I went to sleep. They came in, they closed the place up, turned the lights off, and left. The next thing I know, my mother is in there grabbing me by the arm because I had gone to sleep and she didn't know where I was at. And she only guessed that I was at the theater. So she came in and found me. I'd have slept there all night, I guess.
When we first came here, we ran with what was here. There were old wooden seats here, the original ones.
We really started from scratch.
Yep, it had water standing in the basement, so we had to throw out a lot of things. I think the toughest thing was the ceiling, painting the ceiling.
So we decided to just bite the bullet, close for a weekend, take 2 weeks, gut the place, put in the new seats, put up the new curtains. And when we did that, we were so overwhelmed by the help. You can't believe, over 100 different people showed up here to do things, and we'd say, geez, you know, wish we had some scaffolding, and a local contractor here in town would say, well, you can use mine, or I wish we had this power tool, or I wish we had that, and you'd barely say it and it would be there.
It's run by a lady that's, 80-some, 90 years old?
No.
What?
84.
84, okay, Dorothy's 84.
I was born in 1922. My idea in 1949, I think the farm prices might not have been too good and maybe a drought. And my husband and I were discussing what we could do for more income. And we opened Wednesday, July 19th. The movie was Miss Grant Takes Richmond. We ran 6 days a week. The 7th day we rested. And my husband's name was Cyril, Cyril. And I turned the L and the C, I switched places, and it's spelled lyric. That's why it's a lyric theater, but Cyril's up there in lights.
What do kids do for fun around here?
Go to the theater.
Yeah.
And the carousel.
It's from the 1920s. It's an actual carousel that was donated to the city, and they restored it.
Bob Ketterling bought that at an auction, surprised his wife.
Many years ago.
Yeah, nearly got a divorce over it.
Another businessman wanted to put a building over it, and so we didn't have to tear it down and put it up every year. And now we're known as Carousel City.
And people come from all over the nation to see that.
You know, people do come very faithfully, whether they can see the movie a month earlier up in Aberdeen, they wait to see it and support Dorothy.
Really doesn't make any difference in a small town if you're looking for something to do. It doesn't matter what the movie is, just go.
It's more of a home atmosphere kind of theater than it is the multiplex.
Mom's 84, and it would be physically impossible for her to keep it open, but for all the support she gets in this community.
A lot of community effort goes into it. It's run by volunteers.
I run the concession stand. I have volunteer helpers too that come in and help me every week, 3 nights a week.
One of the problems with running a theater in a small town is the heating costs get so dramatic that you just cannot afford to keep it open in the winter months.
But when the theater opens in the spring, we always have real good crowds. This year, I opened first weekend in May, and I closed October 29th.
You seem to be the inspiration for Tripp and Platt opening a theater.
I don't think there's any way that anyone would deny that it had to look good to other towns. I firmly believe that if there was any way that Wagner could figure out how to do it, they would in a heartbeat. We have a ton of business from Wagner and Lake Andes. Those people love the movies. So it wasn't a big surprise, somewhat of a disappointment when we heard other towns were going to do the same thing that we had done, but it was a good thing.
Were you a farmer around here, Elmer?
I used to be.
Why Armour?
I was born and raised here. That's the reason why.
You aren't all Bohemian, you aren't all German. It's really
I love
mixed.
Armour. I had just a birthday, 80th birthday, and I got 350 birthday cards. Now that's even more than people that's in Armour.
And I wouldn't want to live in a big city.
Come down to coffee here every morning at 8 o'clock, is that the deal?
Yeah, that's right.
You're a pretty rowdy bunch.
You bet. Some mornings will get pretty tough.
Any of you volunteered to work at the theater?
I do, either cashier or concessions.
I sell tickets, and my wife, Jolene, here makes popcorn.
Best popcorn in the state of South Dakota.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. What makes it so special?
I think it's the people that make it and the butter.
Back in March of 1999, a group of 3 of us get thinking, why couldn't we just open it? So in this auditorium, the 3 of us and our spouses got up on the stage behind us and had a community group meeting. Gosh, we had a great turnout. We had approximately 100 people show up, and it was unanimous that the community wanted to give it a shot.
Well, the building had been empty since the mid-'80s. The city owned it, the local theater group used it for a play once a year. Seats were still here, so we had the guts of what could be an operation. Cal had cooked up some very creative numbers before that community meeting.
I took a flip chart and wrote out some numbers, penciling out like, we're gonna spend this much on pop, and we're gonna spend this much on advertising, and this is how many people we would need to have come to the movie each weekend to break even, and my number was 50 people. You know, after it all is said and done, we actually have 20 volunteers a weekend work, so.
You need at least 50 people a night.
That would be a bad weekend if we only had 50 people a night.
Our biggest naysayers were that the volunteers are gonna fade out, because to have 20 volunteers a weekend, keep going and putting all the effort into this is hard to imagine. And from the very first part of '99, when we started the little bit of remodeling we had to do in the auditorium and the theater, you know, there were nights when 20 guys would show up and wives and everyone would pitch in, and we did that for 6 months.
In addition to not knowing what we were doing, we didn't have any money.
Well, that's where our good friend Jeff Logan come into play.
Jeff sold us our initial equipment, old stuff that he had that he wasn't using anymore. And the terms of the purchase were just, you know, well, we're not going to set up payments. If you could pay me back in a year, that would be great. And I think we paid him back in 3 months.
Yeah, very quickly after opening, and Jeff was one of our guests on the opening night.
Lots of cars on Main Street again, and
Have you seen it like that way in a long time?
not for a long time. Not for an awfully long time.
Because we didn't have a viable business open on Main Street other than maybe a bar or a restaurant. That very first night when we were standing out on the sidewalk in October of '99, and Main Street was packed. And for the elderly people that have lived in Armour their whole life, you know, they're reflecting back all the way into the 50s and 60s when Main Street used to be full in Armour.
Saturday and Sunday nights, there's lots of cars on Main Street.
Well, I think that's the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
You know, it drew a lot of business since they reopened.
Did you go to movies there as a kid?
Actually, I started going to the movies at the Lyric Theater. That was the first one that was in Gregory. And it basically burned down. The projectionist panicked when the film got a fire. It wasn't fireproof film like it is nowadays. It was made out of celluloid. And he panicked and threw it down the steps, and rather than closing the door, and it set the whole upstairs of booth afire. And one guy, he lost his life in that fire.
Logistics at work in it.
It was after the war, because one of the main things during the war I can remember was they wouldn't always take money. They would prefer that you'd bring a big hunk of iron and put it on the truck. And that was your show ticket, admittance for whatever show it was. You bought your way in by bartering.
The camaraderie in this town is unbelievable. There's such nice people.
It's a great community. You know, anybody will help you. Everybody's willing to pitch in.
But just a plain, normal, good bunch of folks here, common people that all make their living working. And
he was starting to run out of funds and probably patience, and so the bank was in the process of having to foreclose on it. So I made him an offer, and came back and says, we'll take it. And then I went to the Rotary Club.
a bunch of us Rotarians got together and kind of developed a little fund to get it started again.
We run it as a community group, volunteer labor.
The board owns or runs the theater, and then we pay rent back to pay for the building, so eventually the community will own the building.
The people feel an ownership in it, and
There's a sign-up sheet down at the theater, so if you do come in to watch a movie, you can always sign up then.
It takes the entire community, not only for the volunteer work, but financially, to get it going, to get it up and running and do it right. We are open only in the fall and the winter months.
There's an outdoor theater that's still open, and they run, June, July, and August. So instead of trying to compete with them, it's just easier, and plus it gets harder to find volunteers during the summer months, and our attendance kind of dwindles in May. There's just so much going on.
we do have very good football teams, but our name is kind of unique to the Gregory Gorillas, and people kind of latch onto that.
You go to any football on
right.
Friday night here in Gregory, and it's just packed.
We're very proud of our school and very proud of our mascot, our gorilla name. We're well known throughout the state as a football town.
We don't run movies during the football season on Friday
Right.
nights.
We just run Saturday and Sundays during the football season.
So
There
September.
wouldn't be many people here. When I look out over the balcony here and see some of the people that are here that I haven't seen here ever, and then to hear them comment after the movie that they haven't been here for
20 years, one
20
guy.
years.
One guy said he hadn't been to a movie
know.
for 20 years.
and to have people like that come back after that long and really enjoy themselves, it's a great feeling.
2001, I became aware of a festival in Gregory, South Dakota, and out of curiosity I came. The festival started in 1996.
Then they started inviting scholars from around the country to come and talk about Oscar Micheaux, his films.
Oscar Micheaux was an African American born in the southern part of Illinois near Kentucky, and he left before he finished high school, and became a porter. So in 1905 he came to Gregory and learned to become a farmer, became a successful farmer through the friendship of his neighbors, his white neighbors. Being the only African American in miles from here, he was able to learn how to write and wrote novels and became successful as a novelist. Eventually, he turned to films and how on his own and became very successful at it. An innovator, and marketed all 44 of his films, 22 silent, 22 soundies. I'm interested in promoting filmmaking in South Dakota, as well as creative writing. It brings, not only movies that entertain, but also movies, I'm hoping, through documentaries and through instruction, to educate as well. I think a lot of people in Gregory thought, what's all this man all about? I mean, how many years can you talk about him? But there's so much research that can be done on his life, as well as his films.
What's to do in a small town in high school? What did you guys do for fun on the weekends?
We made movies.
You have to think about, okay, if we're keeping people off the highways that would normally be going 60 miles to a movie, You have a lot of issues there with kids driving and maybe not being really alert to what they're doing. What are likely things that could occur? And not just because I'm an insurance agent by profession, but consequences, auto accidents.
You made your own fun. I mean, that's what you do in a small town, right?
Well, my belief in owning the theater goes back to with helping our youth, giving the youth of this community something to go to entertain them that was not risky. Trying to provide family-type fare, movies that would appeal to a wide variety of people in addition to the youth. I moved here in 1982. Upon arriving in Britain, I had a background in speech and theater from college, and I thought it would be neat to do a community theater. And we let it be known in the community we were looking for a place to do plays. Ivan Bessie approached me one day and said, "Would you consider buying the Strand Theater?"
Strand was started, the grand opening was in 1915. It was built by Claude Baker, who had a theater down the street about a block called the Old Dreamland. It was a frame building. And he built this new one, the Strand, started in the 14, I suppose, during the war. And I went into it, we'd been going about 4 years, I guess, when I got my first job there.
I can remember I lived up the street here, just across on the kitty corner, and we always had to walk to get downtown because my folks never had a car. My dad didn't get a car till 1941. It was a cold walk in the wintertime with deep snow. Just about every winter. Didn't have any of these modern winters. I don't know what happened. Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kids these days, they got it easy with this global warming.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Back in 1915, when this theater was built, they built it with a full basement. And at that time, they had a separate entrance to the basement from the street. And that was to what I call a nightclub or pool hall type atmosphere downstairs.
What went on down there?
Not much. I don't dare talk about that one. The boys used to love to play pool. It was mostly geared for, unless you played pool, it wasn't geared for the women. It really wasn't. So you didn't go down there. Cards and pool.
This theater, of course, was built during the silent film era. And after the show was done, then they would lower that piano down to the basement. While the hole in the floor is not there today, the mechanism that was used to lower it and raise it is still there to have a entertainment afterwards or something like that. It was part of the same operation of the theater here, trying to generate more revenue.
And then later, George Baker ran it for a little while. Ivan Bessie worked for him. And then when Baker's decided to get out of it, Ivan took over.
I started there when I was about a sophomore in high school, and that would be about 1945. And we were ushers, and there were several girls, and I certainly wasn't the first one. I mean, I'm sure they had ushers in the 30s, too, in the late 30s. But it was sort of a plum job as a high school student to get to work at the theater. Now, we didn't get paid, but we got to go to all the movies we wanted to. And we had wonderful uniforms. When I first started there, we had the regular usher-type uniforms with the braid across the top and these little pillbox hats. It was typical Hollywood. Ivan was a good man to work for,
I came over here to the theater, in fact, and met with him in here, and we had a conversation in the theater. He mentioned what he would have to have for the theater at that time. It was like $75,000. And I thought, okay, I think we're going to have to change gears here. After that, the Strand Theater did close, and then in 1987, they decided to have an auction. I made an offer to Ivan. I didn't really know what I was doing at that time, thinking that for $10,000 and some fix-up, we should be able to get the theater up and running. And from about November until April, we renovated the theater the first time. And the condition of the seats were largely like what you see here. They were ripped, the backs were worn, and some of them we did not replace, and they've simply gotten more worn as it came on. And also a lot of the backs were bent very badly. And this was from the people's knees being pushed against them and forcing their weight against it and actually bending it. So they were in terrible shape, and a lot of these front section of seats that you see here were actually not bolted to the floor anymore. They were floppy. And we had to put a new floor in and stabilize the floor first, and then put the flooring on that we did. And it was a monumental undertaking. We also had a lot of community support at that time. People were very appreciative of the fact that we were keeping another building on Main Street open. It was, perceived as a community event, and so the excitement was quite high.
I remember we had set a date to open, and it was getting closer and closer, and we weren't ready.
The movie you opened with here, it was in December.
Santa Claus, December 13th. On a Friday. We were scared to death.
And everybody laughed at us when we said we were going to have it open by spring or before.
4 o'clock the afternoon we were open, we were still laying carpet in the auditorium.
It's a blur to me. I can just remember bits and pieces.
We had gotten a donated popcorn popper, which we didn't really know how to run or if it was going to work.
And we had a great crowd that very first night. And
well, I think we sold out, didn't we?
Yeah, it was a packed house.
We were not ready for the crowd.
But we made it. We made the deadline, and it was fun. We had people lined up way to the corner, waiting to get into the movie.
I think people were curious and wanted to see what we'd done.
Back in 2000, when we decided we wanted to upgrade our projection equipment, I needed some kind of voice of confidence from the community, because I had been subsidizing the theater to the tune of a couple $1,000s a year for several years, and it was to the point where I didn't want to do that anymore. And so I just started a thing, and we called it our star sponsor. I put a star up in the marquee, put your name up there so people can see that you're a star sponsor. What I would ask is that, at the time was $30, $40, $50 that would go towards shipping, is what I tell people. That's about what it costs us to get a movie shipped in here. That has been one of the reasons we've been able to do here in Britain what we've done. The response to our renovations has been really wonderful, to put it bluntly. Since we've reopened, there hasn't been a weekend that we have had less than 125 people. And I've always said we have to have at least 125 people a weekend to break even.
It's a fun job. It's not like you go to work because people come here and they come here to be entertained, and they're in a good mood and they're happy, and so it's a fun job.
The aspect that has impacted the community a little bit, I hope anyway, is the can-do spirit. I think that we kind of showed people that if we work together again, there's a lot of things we can accomplish. Small towns struggle, and I think by everybody getting together and working on this project, it kind of gave them the gumption to try other things and to not be afraid of maybe stepping out of the box a little bit and trying something and working together and see what we can accomplish.
People believe in it, and that's why they show up, and that's why they've kept showing up.
As we've been open and we've been able to make some extra money above and beyond our expenses, we like to give back when there's fundraisers or events going on in town. We began a community scholarship program for high school seniors, so if they volunteer to Lorain, they can apply.
Maybe another small town is thinking about getting the theater going again. What would you say to them?
That question has come up at least 3 or 4 times in the last couple of years. And I never discourage them. I just let them know it's a lot of hard work. And it takes a lot of stick-to-itiveness and not to be discouraged when things don't go right, but they can be surprised at what the small-town community can accomplish and, like I said, work together to do. And I think most of everything we've done has been a positive outcome. I don't think I could say one negative thing.
My mom just had a heart attack, so I've come back here. I'm helping her keep it open for right now.
So why keep it going?
Well, that's a very good question, because I wanted to close it, but my husband passed away at home. That was his wish. The doctors gave him 6 weeks to live. About 5 weeks into this, he looked at me and he said, "Will you, hon, will you keep the theater open?" And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, sure, no problem, I'll do it." And then about a week later, I was trying to ask him some questions. What'll I do about this? What'll I do about that? He looked me in the eye and he said, "Hon, I love you. You'll figure it out." So that's why I've kept the theater open.
What were some of the movies that you like to see?
George Raft.
Charlie Chaplin type of film.
The first movie I ever seen in a theater was Ma and Pa Kettle.
James Bond, Thunderball.
My mom took me to Superman.
Gone with the Wind.
I used to get 50 cents a week and we'd go to the movie every Saturday.
It was a 14-cent movie.
And you could go for a dime and stay all day long.
We earned 25 cents during the week for 10 cents for the show and 5 cents for popcorn. Why, we had money left over.
And then if you got out of the movie and went down to Abbott's Variety, you'd get a Nesbitt bottle of orange for a nickel.
That was the days when we enjoyed life.
Don't enjoy it now?
Oh, yeah.
All these communities had theaters at one time, and they closed during the late 70s, early 80s.
And movies were just kind of down at that time. A lot of small theaters closed up.
Nothing. Everyone stayed indoors.
Back in 2000, four of you decided to do something.
It was a pretty innocent conversation at the time. We were just discussing how we were going to lose another building on Main Street, a way to get the theater going again.
No,
No, it's not possible.
We thought we'd like to give something back. Looked across the street at the old one-time theater that Platt had when we were young. We didn't have no real plan when we put it together. Well, we had a lot of volunteer help, so that made a lot of difference. You know. Retired carpenters, we postal delivery guys working here and keep the community alive, you know.
I've never seen anything like this before.
Well, that's a reasonable remark.
It was really the pit of the Depression, and Mitchell was kind of the middle of the Dust Bowl. But this druggist suggested to my dad, why don't you build a theater? Because theater seemed to be doing well. As he said later, had he known what he really should have known, he never would have done it.
Let's get out of here. Look out!
About 6:30, 6:45 some nights.
Oh, it was closer to the movie than 45 minutes.
The projection room would be tore apart. How are we going to run a movie tonight?
Fortunately, we had a spare in the basement. As tickets were being sold, came through the lobby with a handful of tools and the motor about 15 or 20 minutes before the movie was supposed to start.
I could be walking down the street and somebody would stop and greet me and say, "Oh, we're so thankful that you opened the theater. We just, you know, has made a big difference in our community. Keep it open. Gives us something to do." And it's about the only entertainment in Webster. That's our original silver screen that was in the theater when we bought it, and the only silver screen, they tell me, in the States.
The competition with Paramount was real tough. Paramount took all the best pictures. Dad had to do everything he could to promote and do stunts and wild and crazy things to get people to come to the theater. One of the things he did was to get a live African lion and had it in a room off the lobbies.
Why go see a movie in Britton, South Dakota? Well, at about 6:30, 6:45 some nights.
Tom would come up here, he had the projectors torn apart 45 minutes before a show.
Oh, it was closer to the movie than 45 minutes. That was back when we had 2 projectors.
And I kid you not, the projection room would be tore apart.
One of the really nice features of having 2 projectors that I kind of miss is that chances are really slim for both of them to have a problem at once. So you can usually get on the screen in some form with a movie, but the drive motor quit on the projector.
And I'm thinking, how are we going to run a movie tonight, Alan?
Fortunately, we had a spare in the basement, but we came through the lobby with a handful of tools and the motor about 15 or 20 minutes before the movie was supposed to start. As tickets were being sold, we're carrying projector pieces through there from the basement up to here to make it go.
And by 7:20, the projector was back together, the film was loaded, and we showed a movie.
And I'm very proud of the fact the movie started on time that evening.
He did that on more than one occasion.
You'd really like the public to know, the people to know about your community, about yourself. So anything in summary that you'd really like to tell us?
Well,
tell me why should I come and visit Platt, South Dakota?
See me,
Yeah.
since we know each other now.
Okay.
It's kind of flaky, but I don't know. We have great hunting, fishing. You know, I told you once before, being lucky and and being successful. That applies in sports or in life. I've been into so many deals that most of them not good, but with just probably a little bit of luck, I'd have been a millionaire. I'm not a pauper. I'm not rich. I'm not poor. I'm just.
That in the 30s, that a lot of people still went to the movies even though they were poor.
Well, yeah, I think that most of the time because we didn't have television, there wasn't anything to do, and most of us didn't have. Everybody was in the same boat. Nobody had anything. It's not like it is today that you got the multimillionaires and then you've got the people that are in poverty. You know, and boy, I don't know if that could be balanced out some way. Why, if somebody could invent that, that'd be a great invention. Because it just, some, you know, good hard work pays off. Well, it usually almost always does, but it seems that some people are luckier and some people are unluckier. It may come to the point where the theater city may have to take over the theater and subsidize it. Just swimming pools. Why do they have swimming pools? For entertainment for the kids, and they never make any money. They lose all the time. Or how about your Sioux Falls Arena? You know, that has to be subsidized with tax money. And the same thing in a small town. You don't know anything. Just like people. Some grow bigger and some grow shorter.
So tell me, you got any good jokes for us? Heard any good ones lately?
They probably wouldn't be fit to tell.
Well, let's hear it. Let's I want to hear it. It's okay. We can stop the tape.
Yeah, I can think of one. You know, my grandpa's came from Holland, and when my old Grandpa Vanderboom first came over, why, he got to America. He thought he was great. He'd go into the bar, and so he went into the bar and spoke broken English. I think I need a drink. I want some gin. Oh, the bartender says, "What kind of gin you want?" "Well, I don't know. What kind you got?" "Well, we got oxygen, hydrogen, and nitrogen." And my old grandpa looked at him. "Huh?" He says, "You know, this is just like the old country. Only over there, we got 3 kinds of turds. Mustard, custard, and you big shit." No.
Well, because I'm black.
You can apply this to whatever you want to, but when I was young and in my prime, I used to do it all the time. But now that I'm old and gray, only do it once a day. They're all the same. That's the good Lord's greatest invention was women.
Well, maybe you can find one for me.
Oh, for you?
Yeah.
Oh, you bet.
All right. Counting on you now. All right. I'll come back here in a couple weeks, and you'll have to arrange somebody for me. That's enough time.
Because they're out there looking too. But you just gotta, that special one just gotta come along. And I was pretty near 33 when, I don't know how old you are, but I saved her from being an old maid. She was 24. Can you imagine that? Me, a freshman in high school, and she a first grader? You look at it that way?
Yeah.
But now I have to take care of her, and I'm almost 9 years older. Right?
Well, I tell you what, I think we're done.
You know, the Strand Theater had Indian murals painted on the walls back in the 40s when it was remodeled, probably the last time before our 88 renovation. And we debated leaving them. And people said, "Are you going to leave the Indians? Because they're such a part of the theater."
I wish I could remember who put them on there, who the painter was, but I don't. And Ivan was very proud of them, and especially the entry. It had some scroll work, and unusual paintings. They weren't figures, you know, they weren't people, but, and I liked them. I thought that was for the time, the area, and I thought they were very nice. I would like to know what it cost him to have them put on there, but I have no idea.
I really liked them. I thought they were nice, but they certainly wouldn't go now with this new sound system I see.
Well, the problem was that they were dirty, and this place was dirty. It would have been closed for 3 years, and it needed something to spruce it up. And we made an decision. It wasn't. Some people didn't like it, that we were going to paint over the Indians, and it was nothing to do with the fact that they were Indians or anything like that. It was done just because. Why did you come to the theater? You came to see a movie. You didn't come to watch the walls. And that was our premise. We wanted to clean it up, and some people didn't find it popular, but that's life.
No, they were unique. They were quite nice, and I forgot about them. Carol mentioned the ones up in the lobby. I'd forgotten about those, too. I just kind of watched. I don't know. I didn't think about them one way or the other.